My name is Riku, and I am joined by my colleague Anne, and we are here from the consulting team at Pacvue. Today, we're going to be talking about automation versus manual control and kind of how you should be thinking about each and when you should be leveraging automation versus taking control. So, Anne, just generally speaking, when should you automate?
Yeah, I would say you should automate whenever possible. It really should be the rule that you follow. And if there's a way to automate, you should do so, not only because it's going to give you, ample time savings, and improve workplace efficiency, but it's also going to allow you to prevent human error and do optimizations that you otherwise could have missed.
Yeah, I mean, time savings is massive, right? So anything that you're doing on a repetitive basis, using simple logic, like, hey, if my KPIs are above X threshold, there's an easy way to automate that. So that's really one of the big use cases. Time savings is big. Speaking of which, just can you give us some general thoughts on what things you can automate?
Yeah, I mean, there are tons, but I would say off the top of my head, the first thing that comes to mind is keyword and bid automation. You can use rules, like you said, set thresholds within your systems. So you guide the automation, but ultimately you're doing bid modifications on the daily across thousands of keywords or targets that you otherwise would have spent hours doing, and you're letting the system do it for you. So I use that, every single day in order to keep my account moving forward and seeing growth momentum with those tools.
Yeah, there's a lot of conversation around optimizing keywords, but we can also set automation to either pause ASINs or SKUs that are not performing nearly as well. Obviously, there's some strategy involved in there. One of my favorite things to automate is budgets. So the objective, generally speaking, is to spend relatively consistently on a daily basis. And in order to do that, previously before technology came around, you have to have quite a bit of manual intervention to make sure that on certain days you're not facing overly aggressive. With technology nowadays, you can just have a machine pull all those levers. It saves a ton of time, and you can get some really good control over certain spend ratios and driving incremental growth, spending where it really matters.
Yeah, that's a great example, and kind of aligned with that. Something that we also both likely use on the daily is day parting. So this is another way to control your keyword bids, but to do so with the entire day and the performance of the hour of each day in mind. And so you get this great granular control. It's a great way to also pace your budgets well. Most people don't want to spend at 4 a.m. They'd rather spend at 4 p.m. And so this gives you that kind of flexibility to do that without having to go in at 4 a.m. or 4 p.m. and make those changes yourself. So that's a really, really great tool that I also use on the daily.
For sure. One of the more tedious optimizations that we used to have to make manually was for search placement. I don't know if you remember how many hours it would take to regularly comb those data points and kind of optimize based off of what's working and not working. Nowadays, technology enables you to optimize automatically based off of how you search placement. Fantastic. Another one is also inventory, right? Especially relevant with COVID. A lot of supply chains have really been kind of hindered. Even with the Texas freeze that happened about a month ago, there's some challenges with supply chain. So instead of just spending on products that are going to go out of stock organically, you can have automation pause whenever it makes sense.
Yeah, that's obviously a huge one now and very relevant, something that, most of my accounts are utilizing at the moment.
And I'll tell you what I'm pretty excited for is AI as well. I know that it's a sexy buzzword right now. A lot of people are talking about it. I'm not sure how many people are actually using it, nearly to the degree that they think they are, but we're pretty excited for it, right? We're very much in the nascent stages of AI and kind of paid search. But I think going forward, AI is going to, change the game. It's going to be able to do so many optimizations, look at so many data points that a human plus automation wouldn't be able to do. So I know we're kind of scratching at the surface now, but your and my job might be in jeopardy here when AI catches up. We'll see.
I hope not.
So we talked a lot about automation, but do you have any thoughts on just overall when should you take manual control?
Yeah, a lot of thoughts. I would say that if automation is the rule, then manual optimization should be the exception to that rule. And what I mean by that is you should definitely, there's often situations where you should take control, and those are normally when the circumstances are unique. So when you have some sort of period where your data is going to look different than, your typical baseline, or when you're making a lot of changes, those are times that you'd want to jump in and take control away from the automation that can't necessarily account for those changes as well as a human being can.
One big thing that we always look at is if there's a big difference in budgets going from month to month or even quarter to quarter, it's very difficult for the machine to kind of catch up to that as quickly as it should. So budget changes, fluctuations, that's a really good use case for taking over manual control.
Yeah, another big example of this is obviously any key drive period. So if you have promotions running, C5, Prime Day, these are times when you're going to see these huge swings in your data that, your automation tools might try to pare back when you're trying to bid up in those times. And often, you'll accept some inefficiencies during those periods, but the automation is set up to not accept inefficiencies. So you want to make sure that you take control during those times, especially, with budgets. Because you don't want your campaigns going dark because the automation doesn't really understand that it's kind of an exceptional period.
Absolutely. I mean, this is kind of an age-old problem at this point, the human versus the machine. The machine prevails or does the human prevail? It's all about right now, how can you augment the human with technology? And that's really what we're talking about today. There's no replacement for strategy. Machine is not going to be good at setting strategy, but the human can, leverage technology to kind of, save time, make better informed data-driven decisions. One big thing that we saw in this last year was obviously COVID. And if one person or an advertising manager were to simply leverage automation, it would be very difficult to anticipate some of those big changes that we saw, at least, at the speed at which it would be needed. But overall, like stock inventory as a result of COVID, that's been a big one where manual intervention was needed, can automate it to a certain degree. And then, there's also these budding macro and micro changes, like when charcoal became this macro trend like 5 years ago, technology hadn't kept up with human analysts at that point where, they were able to anticipate that change or that macro trend. So it's staying on top of what's going on in the category, what's going on just in the marketplace in general, and then, kind of formulating some strategies and leveraging the machine.
Yeah, and that's a great lead into kind of my final thought on this is that even if you have your account fully automated, you should be going in and monitoring it pretty closely. Like you said, there's no replacement for human strategy, at least not yet. And so you want to make sure that the changes that are being made are aligned with your overall goals. And also something you'll want to do is update the thresholds that you set to make sure that, again, they're aligned with any changes that you're making on the strategy side of things. So it's really important to have that human touch on your account, even if you're, fully automated in terms of your kind of day-to-day management.
For sure. I think for now, our jobs are probably safe. We'll see here in a couple of years, but yeah, really interesting thoughts, Anne. Appreciate it. If you guys have any ideas on things we maybe missed today, things that we didn't have time to talk about, things that you're automating that might be interesting for others, feel free to drop a line in the LinkedIn post. But if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to our team.
Thanks, everyone.